The afternoon sun cast long, golden streaks through the living room window, painting the walls in warm hues as I stretched on the couch, enjoying the quiet. My husband had left an hour ago, off to one of his long meetings, leaving me alone with nothing but the distant hum of the neighborhood and the occasional chirp of birds outside. The house felt still, untouched by the rush of the outside world, the kind of silence that made time stretch and slow. I barely noticed the knock at first. It was soft, almost hesitant, but enough to pull me from my thoughts. I exhaled, smoothing down my dress as I stood, making my way toward the door. The air inside the house was warm, thick, the lingering heat from the day pressing against my skin. A lazy summer afternoon, the kind that made everything feel heavier, slower. When I opened the door, he was there. The delivery guy. He was holding a package, his grip easy, familiar. I had seen him before, of course. He was the regular one for our area, always arriving at the same time, always with that same half smile that seemed just a little too knowing. And today was no different. Except, his gaze lingered a little longer this time. "Afternoon," he murmured, his voice smooth, his eyes flickering briefly over me before he held out the package. "Got something for you." I tilted my head slightly, accepting it, feeling the weight of his stare just as much as I felt the cardboard in my hands. "Appreciate it." His smirk deepened, slow, deliberate. "Always happy to help." The air shifted. Something about the way he stood there, so at ease, so casually confident, sent a slow ripple of heat through me. Maybe it was the way his shirt clung just slightly to his frame, the warmth of the afternoon sun catching against his skin. Or maybe it was the way I suddenly realized that I didn't want to close the door just yet. I hesitated, my fingers tapping against the side of the package. "You're out late today." He exhaled, tilting his head. "Got held up. Last stop of the day." Something in my stomach tightened. "Lucky me." His brow lifted, his smirk widening. "Guess so." Another pause. A lingering moment that stretched just a little too long to be accidental. I swallowed, shifting slightly against the doorframe. "You must be tired. Could use a break, yeah." His voice dipped lower, smoother. "But that depends." I arched a brow. "On?" His gaze flickered over me again, slow, assessing. "If I'm welcome to take one." The words sent a slow shiver down my spine, my grip tightening on the package. The weight of the moment settled, thick and unspoken, stretching between us like a thread pulled too tight. A choice. One I had already made the second I hesitated before closing the door. The warmth of the afternoon air wrapped around us, the sounds of the outside world muffled by the tension pressing between us. I could hear my own heartbeat, steady but heavy, a quiet drum against my ribs. The way he stood there, waiting, watching, it was different this time. More deliberate. More knowing. I exhaled, stepping back just slightly, just enough to let the doorway widen. My fingers curled around the edge of the package, but I barely felt it now, my focus entirely on him. "Come in." And just like that, the deal was made. The air inside the house felt different now, charged, alive with something that hadn't been there a moment ago. The door clicked shut behind him, the sound louder than it should have been, final in a way that made my stomach tighten. I turned slowly, watching as he stepped further inside, his gaze sweeping over the space before settling back on me. "Nice place," he said, his voice easy, conversational, but there was an edge to it now. A quiet amusement beneath the surface. I swallowed, setting the package down on the entryway table. "Thanks." He took another step forward, slow, deliberate. "Your husband's out?" My pulse ticked up. "Yeah." For long. The question lingered between us, heavier than it should have been. I hesitated, my fingers flexing slightly against the table's smooth surface. Long enough. Something in his expression shifted. Just slightly. Just enough for me to see it. I should have stopped this. Should have laughed it off, stepped away, put space between us before the moment became something I couldn't take back. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there and let the moment unravel all on its own. The door clicked shut, the sound settling heavy in the quiet house. The delivery guy took a slow step forward, his gaze sweeping over the space before settling back on me. The moment stretched, thick with something unspoken, something neither of us seemed eager to break. Long enough, huh, he murmured, echoing my words from earlier. I swallowed, my fingers still flexing slightly against the table. Yeah. His smirk deepened, just slightly, the corners of his mouth twitching upward. Good to know. I exhaled, steadying myself, though my pulse had already begun to betray me, ticking up with each passing second. The air inside the house felt warmer now, heavier, the silence between us charged with something neither of us wanted to name. He took another step, closing the space between us just enough to make my breath catch. So, about that break. My lips parted, but no words came. I should have laughed it off, should have made some excuse, should have found a way to turn the moment back into something casual, something harmless. But I didn't. Instead, I just watched him. The way he moved, slow, unhurried, the way his fingers flexed at his sides like he was giving himself just a second longer to decide whether to reach for me or not. My skin felt warm, too warm, my breath shallow in a way that had nothing to do with the heat outside. "You always let delivery guys inside?" he asked, his voice low, teasing. I exhaled a quiet laugh, shaking my head. No. His brow lifted slightly. Guess that makes me special. I didn't answer, because we both already knew he was right. The silence stretched again, thick and humming with something neither of us tried to ignore anymore. My pulse thrummed steady against my ribs, my skin tingling with the weight of his stare. And then, he moved. Slow, deliberate, the space between us disappearing in a way that felt inevitable, like something that had been set into motion long before either of us realized what was happening. His fingers grazed my wrist, just barely, just enough to make my breath catch, to send a slow ripple of warmth curling low in my stomach. "Tell me to go," he murmured. I swallowed, my pulse a steady drumbeat in my throat. I should. His smirk was lazy now, almost knowing. But you won't. I exhaled slowly, steadying myself. No. His fingers traced higher, skimming the inside of my arm, the touch featherlight but burning all the same. Good. The finality in his tone sent another shiver through me, anticipation curling tighter in my stomach. The air between us was electric now, thrumming with something neither of us tried to resist anymore. The heat, the silence, the weight of what we were doing, it all tangled together, pressing in from all sides. And yet, neither of us moved away. Instead, we let the moment stretch, let it settle, let it become something neither of us could ignore anymore. The tension in the air thickened, our breaths the only sound between us, filling the space where words should have been. His fingers flexed once more against my skin, his grip warm, steady. I could have pulled away then, could have ended this before it became something I wouldn't be able to take back. But I didn't. I stayed. And that changed everything.